Believe Black women. Black women are less likely to receive postpartum anxiety and depression services. Are we swimming in Marco waters? Let's talk about it.
And one of the things that really brought to light where we are in terms of recognizing mental health and how we treat women of color is the latest story and the experience of Megan Markel, in which she expressed that she shared her postpartum depression symptoms with suicidal ideation, and she was not believed, which is outrageous. So, is this a reflection of where we are, or is this an isolated experience? What do you guys think? And this evening, just so you guys know, we have a special guest on the couch. We have our functional and holistic psychiatrist, Dr. Reba Peoples, with us. We're excited to hear her input on this very important topic. So let's talk about Merkel Waters, you guys. What do you guys think about that whole experience?
I mean,
Of course, it's not isolated, but Dr. Peoples, go ahead and open us up. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, definitely it's not an isolated incident. And, the sad thing is that this is something that sort of transcends culture, it transcends country. So Black women, unfortunately, do kind of bear the brunt of not being believed and not having our humanity fully recognized. And the kind of real point that the Duchess's situation brings home is that your socioeconomic status doesn't protect you. Simply being a person of African descent can unfortunately lead to different health outcomes because we do live in a society that is founded on the premise of white supremacy. So.
Yeah, and I love the fact that you kept her title. That is so resistance. I love it. I noticed it. and how do we get here? Why is everyone more believed than Black women? Because it seems like Black women, in comparison to everyone else, so in comparison, certainly in comparison to white men, which is sort of the standard, but even in comparison to other ethnic groups and other minority genders, so why we always seem to be at the bottom and the least believed.
I think for me, I think a lot of people think that Black women are like predispositioned to pain and we can tolerate a lot. The whole strong Black woman doesn't allow you to see, yes, we are strong Black women. However, it doesn't allow you to see our vulnerability. And then when we do say we're in pain or that we're hurting, our pain or our reality is denied. And it's like we are completely dismissed and made to seem crazy or invisible or delusional about the pain that we're actually feeling. And when you deny someone's reality, that in fact creates a whole nother level of mental strain or mental distress. So I think I have a love-hate relationship with that whole strong Black woman because I'm like, yes, we are strong, but then also it doesn't allow you to see my humanity. It doesn't allow you to come for me. Like if I get hurt, I already have the idea that nobody's coming for me unless it's another Black woman because she is who will understand. So if I'm lost or if I'm in pain and I'm like out and about, I think people would honestly walk by and not see me. But if it was a sister, I know I'm safe. You know what I mean? So yeah.
That's sad to
I
say.
think, oh, go ahead, Karen.
No. That was just saying that's sad to say that another, of our kind will just come by and help us, and that's that. But keep on, Olivia.
Yeah. No, I just, on that point, I think it's a couple of things. I mean, I think when we talk about mental health, it is known that since the beginning of time, women in general have been mistreated when it comes to mental health, right? Diagnoses were used against us, hospitalizations were forced upon us. Turning to mental health or giving mental health diagnoses was a way to disempower us, right? As women in general. And then for women of color, especially Black American women, that's like double, right? And I think also it's the way that we communicate. And I say this as somebody who had to learn and understand how Black communicate. I know that sounds crazy, but I was raised with a Mexican mother. and I didn't grow up in a predominantly Black neighborhood. So I had to learn to understand my culture. And I also had to learn not to be afraid of Black women, just in the different cadences in our voice, the way we communicate. And so I've seen just from personal experience how people use that, how they use that they may feel a certain way or feel intimidated. We hear that all the time, right? I felt threatened, to excuse not seeing us as people. And so I think it's a double whammy for us. It's the race on top of being women already, plus a difference in actual languages. You know how people can expect that when you speak a different language? Well, it's almost like we speak a different language.
We
And
do.
And
so
if you add
therefore
another
there's a
factor to
non-negotiable.
that, Olivia, oh, I'm sorry, Dr. C. I was going to add one more point, which is the colorism. Don't be a darker skinned Black woman, a Black woman, and like add that component on top of everything as well. So
Yeah,
I think, like you said, it's a double-edged sword. It's multifaceted for certain.
yeah, and we do speak a different language, which is oftentimes stolen. Folks are always biting on our language. It's okay. We will share. But to your point, and I wonder, because we do embrace with pride the fact that we're considered to be strong. But do we also incorporate that when we decide whether or not we want to disclose or become vulnerable? Is that becoming a personal block for us as Black women to be able to say and reach out for help?
Ooh.
I think it definitely can be. And, a lot of times, kind of the double-edged nature of oppression is that it does force you to become very resilient in very creative ways. And oftentimes that resilience gets woven into culture. But we also have to be very conscientious to recognize that sometimes trauma responses can masquerade as culture.
In
So
resilience, yes.
exactly. So really being able to recognize when it is important to seek help,
Can you
and
expand on
reach
that
out.
for those who may
Mhm,
not understand fully what you mean by that? I think that's an interesting
mhm,
point.
mhm. For sure. So, when we are traumatized, we can respond in a few characteristic ways. So anytime that the body is under threat, you have sort of four characteristic responses. So you can, fight, you can flee, you can freeze, or you can do something called fawning or making yourself small. Um, so in the animal world, if you've ever heard the term deer in the headlights, that's when you sort of the animal gets sort of frozen with fear, and that's actually nature's way of protecting the animal from experiencing pain. So if it does get attacked or something terrible happens to it, that freezing response actually kind of numbs the ability to experience pain. Whereas when we have that response as people, that looks like not being able, it looks like kind of running away from experiencing pain. So that may be things like, alcohol use or, emotional eating or shopping addictions or, sexual compulsions. So ways to avoid having to deal head on with what's happening emotionally. And then the fawning response, if you've ever seen an animal that's been abused or beaten, it physically makes its body small, huddling in a corner. And what that does is it signals to the other animal, look, I'm smaller than you, I'm not a threat, don't hurt me. So as people, we have those same responses in kind of pleasing behaviors. So if you've ever had to walk on eggshells around somebody or, tiptoe around them or choose your words carefully, or, a few years ago when there were all those public service announcements about, how to respond to the police if you get pulled over, hands on the wheel, yes, so yes, sir, no, sir. So those are all fawning responses. So those are trauma responses. And, the thing about trauma responses is that when those stress hormones are activated, you have to have a way to dissipate them. You have to have a way to kind of clear your body of that cortisol and those other hormones that are flooding your system. But those last two responses, so the freezing or fawning, don't allow you to do that. So that's why we end up having a higher likelihood of chronic illness and chronic disease. So when we think about, why is it that Black women have higher rates of things like hypertension or diabetes or heart disease, it's not that there's something genetically different about Black people. But our experience day in and day out as Black people in America does lead to us being disproportionately impacted by traumatic stress.
And I like that you brought up that point, because I think it's, the medical society, we have worded it in such a way that it almost puts blame on the patient, that we're high risk. So Black people are high risk for this and high risk for that, where it's really not. It seems to almost imply that there's a genetic predisposition for all of these bad outcomes, where it's really just a reflection of our experience in a racist society.
Exactly.
And so I'm glad that you brought up that point. So how do we shift gears? How do we get to the point where we are believed, number one, and we do not have a Merkel experience, or that we are even free, feel liberated and safe to be able to be vulnerable? How do we get to that point?
That's a big question. And really, I think that it's important to have three things. So kind of the first thing is context. So really understanding how we made it to this point in history. So really understanding the nature of racism, understanding the nature of white supremacy, understanding the nature of patriarchy. Because when you are able to understand the larger kind of structural factors, then you're able to recognize your place in it, and see that it's not something that I've done. So, even when we think about our language, when we say that, people were killed by the police just because they were Black or because of the color of their skin. No, being Black has nothing to do with it. They were killed because, this police officer is racist. So, really kind of saying what it is, and being able to recognize where the blame lies, rather than kind of internalizing that there is something inherently wrong with us, as we navigate through these structures. And then I also think, the second phase is really getting clarity. So doing that critical self-reflection and understanding, what is the story that's gotten attached to the context. So it's one thing to really understand what's happening in the world, but also it's important to understand what we've made that mean about us. So what is the story that we've created about ourselves in response to the context? And then that's when you start to take that action of really being kind to yourself, and those acts of radical self-care, and also recognizing that we're not responsible for fixing racism. We are responsible for our own liberation.
That part. And it's interesting, because I think the whole fact of what you're saying in terms of going to the basis of the structure of society and our culture, and uprooting the racist roots there first, right? Like, if it's kind of like if you're trying to correct a weed invasion in your garden, you don't start at the tree, you start at the roots and uproot the weed itself. And I think that a lot of the approaches to women's health and in general is the fact that we're talking about the endpoints. A lot of money is being poured into the endpoint. Like, how do we? And I'm not saying that that's not relevant, but I don't think that that's going to ultimately fix the numbers. I think we do have to go back and trace and see, how did we get here? How did we get to the point where Black women are not believed on so many levels? What are the things that we can change from the point of our conception, right? Because even in utero, we start with all these high risk experiences because we're experiencing our mom's experiences, right? And so now you have that generational trauma. And talk to us about that. How does generational trauma really affect from one generation? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, and there's this concept of epigenetics. So we can actually sort of pass on ancestral trauma. So epi meaning kind of above the gene. So, we have our genetic code, but, genes don't necessarily determine destiny. So, our environment shapes whether or not certain genes are expressed. So when people have experienced trauma, the ways that our stress hormones, for example, are expressed can look differently in people who are born to parents who have had traumas. Also, even when we look, down to, the chromosomal level. So we have something called telomeres that are on the end of our chromosomes, and those, the telomere length predicts cell longevity. And Black women actually have shorter telomere lengths, specifically Black women who live in the United States. So on average, we age 7.5 years faster than non-Black women. And a lot of that has to do, directly with racism and toxic stress.
So we need to move. Is that what I'm hearing? I think I'm going to the. I think we need to move, y'all. I mean, if that is what you're prescribing, Doc, I'm all for it.
You want
Wakanda or Zamunda, one of the other.
Right.
And we will be going in a private jet. You may have in a boat. We will be leaving in a private jet. But to your point, I wanted to touch on that because I think there are certain things that we say that can then lead to even further harm, right? So we pride ourselves in the fact that Black don't crack. How many people love that slogan? We have it on T-shirts, we have it on hats, we have it everywhere. And yes, in terms of our skin, it doesn't show our aging, but like you said, science is really showing that we do have accelerated aging on the inside.
Wow.
Why we're more likely to have all these chronic diseases at an earlier stage. And the problem is, if we don't really talk this truth, then if I'm in front of a practitioner, they're not going to have the level of suspicion because they're thinking, oh, but she's younger, right? So I'm not going to anticipate seeing diabetes yet or hypertension yet. So then we have a delay in treatment and diagnosis. So it's really, I love these key points. And y'all, let me tell you, y'all done blow it up. I'm going to sit down and meditate on a lot of things Dr. Peoples just said.
Right.
Because I was like, that's like a thesis right there.
Okay. She took us to school. We took notes.
Listen, y'all better catch these pearls of wisdom, okay? Yes. But to summarize, it sounds that we're seeing a couple of things, right? So we're definitely saying that the overall racist society that we live in is really the underlying reason why Black women are not believed. And then, we, to a certain extent, have internalized some of those racist ideologies. And then a lot of it has to do, a lot of how we respond to our experiences is really reflection of trauma, some of which can be genetic, which can be preventable if we have the environment that helps those genes not to be activated and turned on. So a lot of really good gems, but you guys, we're not going to end here. We're definitely going to have Dr. Peoples back because we need to digest some of this.
Yes.
Dr. Peoples, where can they find you?
So my website is amarahealthandwellness.com. I do have an Instagram. I'm not very active on social media, but that's at Reba Peoples. I have maybe 10 followers.
Love it. So the Instagram handle is what?
At Reba Peoples.
Love
so just
it,
my name.
Love it. So you guys check her out, especially if you're in Georgia and Minnesota, right?
Exactly.
Awesome. And where can they find you, Karen? We're going to go real quick.
They can find me at What a Touch on IG.
Awesome. And come on, Chastity, where can they find you?
At miss._CHAZ on IG.
Love it. Come on, Midwife, where can they find you?
On Instagram at This American Midwife.
And I am Dr. T, the hand behind the handle of Healthy Bum Club. Definitely rewatch this video a couple of times because let me tell you,
take notes.
I'm about to do the same thing. Okay, take some notes, y'all. And we'll see you on the next episode. Check out the other videos. Bye. Thank you, Dr. Peoples.
Thank you, Dr. Peoples.
Thank you.
We love that you are a part of our community and we want you to continue to be a part of our community. So go ahead and do what? Like the videos, hit notification, and subscribe. We appreciate you guys.